Because of our extended news bulletin to cover events in the Gulf, I'm afraid tonight's edition of Blockbusters has had to be postponed to a later date. You're watching TVS.
Elderly people die in a hospital salmonella outbreak.
Will the football authorities pay for the fans' Bournemouth riot?
Education chiefs decide where the £1 million axe is to fall.
And a first-class round from Mike the Singing Postman.
Good evening. 3 elderly patients have died from salmonella poisoning at the Royal Southampton Hospital in Southampton. Another 3 elderly patients and 2 ward staff are thought to have the infection.
1 ward has now been isolated and no further patients are being admitted into it. Other staff at the hospital are being screened for the infection. My Davies sends this report.
The outbreak on Upper Crab Ward started after an elderly patient was admitted as an emergency. Salmonella didn't show up on first testing, but the man was already incubating it and died a week later. 2 elderly women in the same ward then died, 1 last week, 1 last night, both having been infected with salmonella, although the hospital say it wasn't the cause of death in these last 2 cases. The control of infection team at the hospital started screening staff and patients from the ward for salmonella, but not until the second patient had died 6 days after the first death.
We tested the first patient as soon as he was admitted, but his first specimen gave a negative result, and it was only when a positive specimen was found that we went on to test other patients.
You didn't actually test other staff until the second death, though, did you?
I don't think I'm going to answer that, Nick, because they'll have to cut this bit out. Refresh my memory.
Mr. Farrow seemed confused over the hospital screening and had to refer to a colleague. He then refused to answer our question.
No, I'm not prepared to continue.
Right. But the Director of Public Health then answered it for us.
It is all a matter of judgment. The amount of resource that it would require to track down, to take all of these precautions every single time a patient comes in with an infectious condition would use up all of our budget. It's always got to be a matter of where do you spend your very precious resources. Sometimes those judgments may be wrong. I don't think they were in this instance. I think we acted totally responsibly.
The incubation period for salmonella is 1 week, and it can take 72 hours to test for the virus in the laboratory. The ward has now been isolated and no new admissions are being made, as the virus can be transmitted from person to person under certain conditions. 3 patients and 2 staff from the infected ward are suffering from the virus. All the other staff who worked on the ward have been traced, but not all have been tested. But the hospital say they're confident the outbreak has been contained. My Davies, Coast to Coast, Southampton.
Bournemouth could get £250,000 compensation for the damage caused by Leeds football fans last May. A delegation from the town met representatives of the Football Association in London today. Afterwards, Bournemouth's 2 MPs said the way was now clear for legal action. Peter Henley sends this report.
Bournemouth's 2 MPs came to tell the football bosses that Leeds have not paid the price for the havoc their supporters wreaked in the town. Leeds fans left a trail of destruction on their Maybank holiday rampage. The cost of repairs isn't completely covered by insurance, and many shopkeepers lost business. In all, the town is asking for £250,000 compensation. The MPs say Leeds have got off lightly.
They were not punished, they were not penalised for the behaviour of their supporters in Bournemouth last May, and that, as far as we're concerned, is totally unsatisfactory.
The football club have disassociated themselves from their violent fans. This year's fixture has been brought forward to avoid the bank holiday. The FA have threatened to expel Leeds from all future competition if they can't control their followers. This season, away games have been all ticket, and so far the medicine seems to be working. The club's success on the field has left them rich. Manager Howard Wilkinson's reported to have been offered a £1.5 million pay deal. However, after today's meeting, the Bournemouth representative said the first approach for compensation would be to the Football League, who they hold mainly to blame.
I think it clearly lies more with the league than with anybody else. And I think there was a tacit admission of that from the FA, that they should not have disregarded the advice that was given to them nearly a year before by the Chief Constable of Dorset, asking that that fixture should be moved.
So what can they do as recompense?
The total of the claims for the town as a whole comes to about £250,000, of which about 45,000 would be attributable to the council and the rest to other large and small businesses in the town. I would hope we could reach agreement out of court.
But the FA won't be backing the claim.
I can't make any commitment whatsoever. We've had a full exchange of views this morning, and the Bournemouth people have gone away to think about the next move.
The council will bring the first test case for compensation. They're hoping the league will settle before it comes to court. Peter Henley, Coast to Coast.
A delegation from Dorset has told the Armed Forces Minister that the closure of Portland Naval Base would be an economic disaster for the area. Union leaders and councillors say up to 2,000 jobs could be lost if the naval base is shut down. Its closure is still being considered as part of defence cuts despite the Gulf War. Guy Phillips reports.
The delegation arrived at Whitehall with a clear message for the Armed Forces Minister Archie Hamilton, who'd taken time off from Gulf duties to attend the meeting. The group gave him a detailed report spelling out the economic disaster Portland faces if the naval base is closed. It says up to 2,000 jobs would be lost. Unemployment would rise by 28% in the area, and the cost to the local economy would be £19 million a year. The Navy uses Portland as a training centre, with the nearby air base at HMS Osprey serving as a base for Lynx helicopter training. But there's mounting speculation that Portland has been targeted by the government for closure. Today's meeting lasted less than an hour, but the government couldn't guarantee Portland's future.
It was made very clear to us that the economic consequences which would result to Portland is very useful to have that message. But our duty is truly to look at all the options which are available for our naval bases, and Portland has to be looked at too, along with Rosyth and Portsmouth and Plymouth and all the other Ministry of Defence estates.
The delegation is angry that the government is still considering major defence cuts when the country is at war, although a decision is unlikely for at least 2 months. Guy Phillips, Coast to Coast.
And joining us now in our Westminster studio is Ian Bruce. Mr. Bruce, how did the discussions go today?
I think it went very well. We had a large group of ministry people together with Archie Hamilton and with Ken Carlisle, and I think that we really did get the message over, if it needed to be got over, that Portland is doing an excellent job and that it would cost a great deal of money to move the base and its facilities elsewhere.
The problem is, of course, that if you save Portland, you shift the problem onto another dock's shoulders, and that's not really fair, is it?
Well, I think that what is more sensible is for the Navy to be looking at all 3 bases along the south coast and deciding how it can reduce facilities without closing anything.
The 3 bases being Portsmouth, Plymouth and Portland.
That's right. And indeed one could put up an argument, for instance, that in Portsmouth at the moment, the civilian docks are being squeezed too much and could do with additional wharfage area, and it may well be that the Ministry of Defence could ensure that jobs are created in Portsmouth by giving up some of their facilities there to civilian use.
Mr. Bruce, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ian Bruce, views that may not necessarily be shared in Portsmouth. Meanwhile, an RAF pilot from Hampshire is recovering in hospital after his Tornado jet crashed in Saudi Arabia. Wing Commander Michael Heath from Southsea was forced to eject when the aircraft developed control problems. He has back injuries, but is expected to make a complete recovery. Now a look at the rest of the day's stories from the coast-to-coast news centres across the south.
Good evening. A former Army Major has condemned the amount of compensation offered to him by the Ministry of Defence, who wrongly gave him a criminal record for 25 years. He says their error ruined his life. 67-year-old Major Peter Corrie from Basingstoke claims he couldn't get a permanent job. Potential employers were put off by his record, but he had no idea the incorrect information was on his Army files. He'd been convicted of theft in the 1960s, but then cleared of the charge on appeal. However, the MOD failed to update their records. Major Corrie has been offered several £1,000s compensation, but he says the amount is derisory and will continue his legal battle for a sum approaching £500,000. 850 jobs are to be lost in Berkshire with the closure of a large engineering firm. The Van der Velde factory at Maidenhead is shutting down because their lease on the building runs out next year. The owners of the land intend to redevelop the site. Chris Wilson reports.
Production here will be gradually phased out over the next 2.5 years before this plant eventually shuts down for good. Van der Velde have a lease on the factory which expires at the end of 1992, but the firm have managed to negotiate an extra 6 months' grace from the site owners, the Provident Mutual Assurance Company. They've now been granted planning permission to redevelop this area of the Van Wall Business Park here on the outskirts of Maidenhead. Van der Velde, who are owned by the T&N group of companies, mainly produce bearings and washers for the auto industry. T&N also plan to build another new facility at Lothian in Scotland. Some 550 staff from the factory here in Maidenhead will be offered the chance to relocate north of the border. The remaining 300 employees will be gradually laid off in what the company describes as a process of natural wastage. Chris Wilson, Coast to Coast, Maidenhead.
Meanwhile, another major firm has announced job losses. The electronics firm Motorola is based at Basingstoke. It makes radio communications equipment, but has been hit by the recession. 10 staff are to lose their jobs. A man has sexually assaulted a woman as she walked home from Bagshot railway station. She'd reached Windlesham when a man pulled up in a white van. She refused his offer of a lift, but the driver got out and attacked her. The deaths of 7 pensioners at an old people's home in North Hampshire will not be investigated by an inquest. The pensioners died within a period of just 3 weeks at the Oakridge House home in Basingstoke. They'd all contracted a flu-like virus. After the spate of deaths, the home stopped admitting new residents, but coroner Andrew Bradley has decided all the old folk died from natural causes. The pop group 5 Star are still trying to sell their £2 million mansion in Berkshire. 5 months ago, bailiffs took possession of the luxury property at Sunningdale after the pop group ran into financial trouble. That's all from me. Now return to the Coast to Coast studio and Fern.
Hampshire County Council are tonight still discussing proposals to close 6 adult education institutes to help save £3 million. Staff and students fear that thousands of jobs and courses could disappear, but education officials have assured them that the courses would be taken over by schools and colleges. A short time ago, at the same meeting, councillors decided they wouldn't stop the school meal service. Chris Peacock reports.
200 protesters, furious at proposals to close 6 adult education institutes in Hampshire, chanted outside county headquarters at Winchester. The demonstrators say 4,000 teaching staff could lose their jobs and hundreds of adults their classes.
There are so many elderly people who in fact don't go out during the week, and this is their only contact with other people.
Hampshire County Council want to close institutes like this one at Dibden Purlieu to save money. The education budget is overspent by more than £3 million. This is due to the cost of the national curriculum and of schools opting out. Lights burned inside county headquarters tonight as the meeting went on. A proposal to cut school dinners was thrown out, much to the relief of parents who'd expressed dismay at the idea of removing a valuable source of nutrition from the children's lunch table. But the real protest now centres around the future of adult education classes, seen by many as a vital asset in the community. There were reassurances during the debate from the education chairman. He said that classes would be run instead by schools and colleges, subsidies would continue and fees would not increase. But the unions were not convinced.
They shouldn't cut our classes. They're very essential to many, many people.
That view was shared by opposition councillors tonight, who claimed that once the classes were closed, they would never reopen. Chris Peacock, Coast to Coast, Winchester.
Well, we've just heard, in fact, that the Education Committee has voted by just 2 votes in favour of a package which will include the closure of the 6 adult education institutes. I understand that will mean the total budget will be cut by nearly £7 million. And although the school meal service is safe, there will be savings of £500,000. And for an instant reaction to that, I've just been joined by Richard Harris from the National Association of Teachers in Further and Higher Education. Mr. Harris, a reaction from you to that news?
Well, clearly we're saddened and depressed. I don't think it recognises the full value of what the institutes are doing. Our union doesn't think that the schools are ready or willing or able. In fact, I know some schools do not want to run the service. We don't think that the figures add up, and we cannot possibly see how the proposal will meet the reassurances of the chairman.
And you're worried about job losses as well, I believe?
Indeed. It's likely that in the £1 million out of adult education cuts, many of our members who are specialists in adult education will lose their jobs, and we should be monitoring the chairman's reassurances, because frankly we don't think the figures add up.
You see, the education authorities need to save money, and an awful lot of money. That's their predicament. How on earth are they to do it?
None of the people in any union connected with education wants one part of the education service to be cut to fund another, but that is what is happening this afternoon. In order to help the schools with national curriculum and local management of schools, they are cutting £1 million out of adult education budget.
But surely it is more important that the children are allowed to have their education, more important than adults who perhaps already had an education.
Education is a lifelong process and doesn't end at 16. And if you withdraw the funds for that which is provided when people leave school, you're cutting out and sending a message to school children about education ending at 16, instead of being something you can value for all your life.
Richard Harris, thank you so much for joining us. Now, Fern.
Sussex police are facing legal action tonight after a man they'd twice arrested on the same charge was later cleared in court. Bill McCabe from Brighton spent several months in prison waiting for the case to be heard. He says he's been victimised and his life has been ruined. Mark Bishop sends us this report.
32-year-old Bill McCabe was arrested just over a year ago. He was charged with arson with intent to endanger life and the theft of £625 from the Withdean Stadium pub near Brighton, where he worked as a barman. The arrest was made just days after the pub was damaged by fire. He was remanded in custody at Lewes Prison for over 3 months, before appearing at Brighton Magistrates Court, where it was decided Bill McCabe had no case to answer. But just 3 months after that, he was rearrested and charged with the same offences. But again, after spending more time in prison, the case against him was dismissed.
I'd lost everything, and I spent 3.5 months on remand, which was, to me, incredible. Each time I went to court, I was just reminded. I was never allowed to say anything. My solicitor tried, but nobody seemed to want to listen. It seemed that the police just kept saying we have so much evidence against him that he's guilty. And when it came down to the crunch, they had no evidence.
Now his solicitor is attempting to take Sussex Police to the High Court and sue them for malicious prosecution.
The prosecutor last Saturday said that he was recharged with those matters because there was a good prospect of further evidence becoming available. So they recharged him on the prospect of evidence. And that seems to me very wrong indeed, deeply wrong.
Sussex Police have refused to comment. In the meantime, Bill McCabe says he will carry on the fight to clear his name. Chris Peacock, Coast to Coast, Brighton.
Coming up in part 2 of tonight's Coast to Coast, the extraordinary singing postman of Sussex.
How I love you, my dear old...
And a hat-trick of Smiths from Australia.
Buongiorno, signor. Come sta? What's occurring? Bene. Those are your kids. That's our holiday. This is your wife learning Italian. Bene, grazie.
Chance of a bite to eat?
Behind you is the kitchen. Next to the micro, there's a can of Heinz Wholesoup. Buongiorno, signor. Come sta?
Ham and butterbean.
Bene. Bene, grazie. Buongiorno, signor.
I booked a caravan at Clacton. Luigi on the rank, he swears by it.
Hi, I'm Loopy, and I'm simply nutty about new Kellogg's Honey Nut Loops. Golden honey, crunchy nuts, and from the most, all looped together in a new great tasting cereal. Kellogg's Honey Nut Loops, let's loop together. Honey Nut Loops.
dear, she hasn't got the power, but you could have. National Power and Powergen.
Register now and you could qualify for incentives. Call 0272-272-272 for a prospectus.
Well, that's probably good she's got the power after all. Yes.
Our Billy changes his mind as often as his socks.
Great, Mum.
So in anticipation of these little foibles, I keep his favourite Findus Lasagne in reserve. What effect this forsightedness might have on him this time, I've no idea.
Ciao, Mama.
Make a meal of it with Findus Lasagne.
When we say,
Service Link, we're here to help you.
we really mean it. For a plumber in Poole, electrician in Eastleigh, roofer in Ringwood, or a builder in Basingstoke. In fact, anybody, anywhere, 24 hours a day. With the unique Service Link assurance, all our tradesmen and professionals are carefully assessed, tried and tested to give you the best service at the fairest price. Call us now on 0202 296 888, 24 hours a day, and we'll say,
Service Link, we're here to help you.
Welcome back to you. Still to come, the singing postman and the infallible weatherman. Before that, though, sport with David Bobin. We've got some cricket from Australia, but first some bad news for the Saints fans on the eve of a big match.
That's right, Fred. Yes, the Southampton footballer Matthew Le Tissier has been ruled out of tomorrow night's Rumbelows League Cup replay against Manchester United. Le Tissier was carried off with a hamstring injury at the end of Saturday's match against Nottingham Forest. In fact, he's likely to be on the sidelines for 2 weeks. But at least Jimmy Case is fit to return, and he'll take over from Alan McLaughlin, who's ineligible. Well, the Hampshire cricketer Robin Smith is hoping his return to form will ensure his place in the England team. Until his century against Queensland, Smith was in danger of being dropped for the 4th test against Australia, which starts in Adelaide on Friday. For most of the England squad, it's been a nightmare tour so far. But Robin Smith's century, his first of the tour, and England's win against Queensland does seem to have set them, finally, on the road to better things. For new dad Robin Smith, the arrival in Australia of his wife Kathy and his baby son Harrison, it's a proud but noisy moment.
He's usually been very well behaved. So he arrived over, I met him about a week ago, and I think I've only heard him cry like this once or twice, so I'm most embarrassed at the moment. But he's been ever so good, and I'm just absolutely delighted with what Kathy produced.
Smith's poor form on the tour so far has been blamed by many on his worries about the birth of his new son, something Robin denies.
No, it's definitely not. I mean, if anything, it should be an inspiration. I mean, I just, you know, when I walk out to bat, I don't think about Harrison, but it certainly hasn't affected any form whatsoever. But, you know, if anything, I'm just delighted that he's over here, and it should inspire me to score lots of runs.
And let's hope the runs will again be flowing for Robin in the next test later this week. That's it from sport. Here's Fern.
Thank you very much. Villagers in West Sussex have been receiving a postal service they consider to be first class. Not only are they getting their letters on time, but they're being delivered with a musical accompaniment from the man they all know as the singing postman. Ray Kemp reports.
Oh no, 'twas the truth in her eyes ever shining that made me love Mary, the rose of Tralee.
Residents in the villages and hamlets around Petworth know their letters are on the way before they ever arrive. For amateur operatic star Mike Hubbard likes to practice his lines as he goes about his rounds.
I'm in love, and it's no, nay, never.
His singing hasn't made him a fortune, but his appearance with the Post has brought happiness to hundreds of satisfied customers.
Everybody looks forward to Michael coming along in the mornings to keep making everybody happy and cheerful.
Everybody knows Michael when he's around. He's been singing around for years. He does an awful lot of good with the old people.
You're the queen of all the roses.
But Mike's singing has got him into trouble in the past.
I knocked on the door, goes bowling in there. I said, there's a rainbow round my shoulder and a starry sky above. Oh, the moon shines bright 'cause I'm all right, 'cause I'm in love. Whatever's going on, she said. I'm going to ring up the post office about this. She said every day the post never had such a thing. And I had to write an apologetic letter to her. And on top of that, I got bitten with a dog when I left, so it wasn't a very successful adverts, that one. I asked her for credit.
Mike may never have made it onto the stage of one of the great opera houses of Europe. But over the 30 years he's been a postman, his audience has been just as large and just as enthusiastic.
No, nay, never, no more will I play the wild rover. No, never, no more.
Ray Kemp, Coast to Coast, Petworth.
I think he's smashing, don't you?
Bit of a star,
Yes.
I think, eh?
Our own first-class weather service now, Carl Tyler.
Thank you, Fred. Well, certainly, that cloud came in a bit quicker than we thought today, but it was still late in the afternoon before it reached the west of Dorset. So Dorset, they got a fair amount of sunshine. Now, to see what's happening, let's have a look at the overall weather pattern, and as you can see, the high pressure sitting over the Midlands. Now, that cloud came sneaking in on the southern side of that high pressure, but still, to the north of the high, relatively cloud-free. And as that high drifts slowly south, in fact, by noon tomorrow, you can see that high, it's sitting literally over southern England, increases the chances of perhaps seeing a little bit of sunshine, particularly for the north of our area, as we go through tomorrow afternoon. But it looks like a dry and settled day at least. Tonight, dry with a good deal of cloud around, but there will be a few breaks in that cloud, particularly down over Dorset, and there you may see temperatures down to -1, that's 30 degrees Fahrenheit, whereas Sussex, 2 or 3 degrees warmer. So a local air frost tonight, but I think a widespread ground frost. And then tomorrow morning, a dull start to the day, but gradually brightening up as we go through the morning. Again, perhaps a touch of sunshine down in Dorset. Then for the afternoon, as that high pressure drifts slowly south, we may see a little bit of sunshine appearing, particularly for the north of Hampshire and over Wiltshire. Temperatures tomorrow very similar to today, around about 745 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, a pressure setting for you tonight, we're looking at 1,039 millibars, that's 30.68 inches. Looking ahead for the next 2 or 3 days, well, Thursday and Friday I think are going to be very similar. We may well have fog problems overnight, lingering around during the mornings, then brightening up for the afternoons. Saturday, quite a bright start, perhaps some rain late in the day. Our picture tonight, that's by Michelle Thompson, and the summary tonight, dry with a local frost, tomorrow dry, bright, some sunshine.
Thank you, Carl. The main headlines in the south tonight. 3 patients have died from salmonella poisoning at a Southampton hospital, and another 5 people are thought to be infected.
Bournemouth could get £250,000 compensation from the Football League for damage caused to the town by rioting Leeds fans.
And the Armed Forces Minister has been told that shutting Portland Naval Base would be an economic disaster for the area.
The TVS Late News tonight at 10:50. We're back tomorrow at 6:25. From us all, good night.
A quick look ahead now. In a couple of minutes there are a few surprises in Emmerdale, after which Nature and Wildlife pays a visit to Langston Harbour near Portsmouth. That's at 7:30. There's a report on the Gulf at 8, which means that the bill is now at 8:10. Michael Barrymore introduces some more contestants hoping to strike it lucky at 8:40, and at 9:10 the news headlines are followed by El Cid. With the news at 10 an hour later, followed by the TVS News and Weather at 10:50, these are programmes tonight on TVS. After the break, we've the latest news reports on the Gulf.
This week, when you buy 2.5 litres of ASDA Brilliant White Emulsion, we'll give you 20% extra free.
Now there's even more for your money at ASDA.
I had been shipwrecked on this island now for 3 long years. I was becoming weary of the same old food. Then one day I came across a wooden case. Inside I found a curry sauce, a chili sauce, and spicy tomato, all from HP. My food was now much improved. I wish I could say the same for Friday. You still can't get my name right.
Pass the sauce, Harry.
Add variety to life with the spicy sauces from HP.
To date, science has failed to come up with a better nasal decongestant than xylometazoline. The active ingredient in this nasal spray. Otrivine. Why let congestion get up your nose?
Low-fat instant Horlicks. The natural way to relax.
It seems Arthur has built up quite a following, telling everyone about Kattomeat's new tastier recipe. Even though the last thing they want is his autograph. Kattomeat. Arthur wouldn't put his name to anything else.
Hey, good looking.
Smells good. You can't eat that.
You got cooking. How's about cooking something up with you? You can't eat that. Hey, sweet baby. You can't eat that. Don't you know that?
Findus Lean Cuisine, with over 20 low-fat dishes that taste great. You can.
If you want to know just how lemony new Lemon Fairy is, open a bottle.
TV Times has it all. The best features. This week, we uncover the real Rita Petra, the heartwarming story of the Antarctic seal, and the true faces of P.C. Hollis. TV Times has it all. Big 4-page film guide, all the soaps news, great competitions. This week, you could win a star cruise on the fabulous QE2. And only TV Times has the complete week ahead on ITV and Channel 4 in full and at a glance. It's so easy to use. Get TV Times for all that's coming on TV.
On Thursday, words of wisdom from a worried man.
We never know when the Grim Reaper's going to strike. We are but blades of grass waiting for the great forecast to come along.
Oh, but miracles don't happen in Hounslow.
Oh, no. Nightingales sing in Berkeley Square, don't they?
The SAS is getting, boys.
Minder, Thursday on TVS.